like
That's
it? What do you
amazing, bro.
think?
The clouds make a lot of
courtesy
sense.
the iPad
I just
Pro?
don't know what the significance of the vine is. Is this like the paradise
Are
temple?
you joking? Tell
Breaking
tell
in?
me, I mean, how could you not know
Yeah,
the
like
Are we
significance
above
of the
the
what does the
clouds now?
vine?
vine have to do with theology?
Do I think you have the clouds on top?
So
'Cause,
listen,
like,
have
this-
you
that's
guys
the clouds.
read the Old
Yeah,
Testament?
why is the vine above the clouds?
Yeah, bro. It's like I'm really. Is this the intermediate state?
I know you just come back from a dispensational conference, but you need to pull yourself together. You need to pull yourself together. This is the vines, the garden, the cloud. The cloud's at the bottom. We're on the cloud.
Oh,
It's
a
like it
garden in the
envelops.
sky.
And then you've got the sun.
Yeah,
This,
it's the
you know,
temple.
Yeah.
thinking, you know, and the
Oh,
sojourners.
yes.
We're now entering into the destination. It's like
Got it.
it's the
Got it.
doodle thinking about glory. Come on. And then not to mention the whole metaphor of the Old Testament with the vine. And oh my goodness, I mean, just
Yeah.
somebody stop me. You know? All right. Are we sold?
It's good. I just.
Yeah, I like
what
it.
colors should I do them in? Is this adult coloring it?
This is our doodle logo. All right. I thought it was good. I'm just doodling. I think it's
That's
good.
really good, bro.
Like it's great. Did you do this on the iPad with the pencil?
Yeah. I thought it was good. I mean, my clouds are good.
That's-
Yeah.
I'll be
I can
honest.
see
Your
faces.
vine,
If you
your
just like,
vines.
if you squint, if you squint your eyes, you can see a little profile face there. Can you see it?
No.
On the cloud.
There's the nose, and there's the mouth, and there's chin.
Oh yeah, it's like an old lady.
Can you see it? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
No, that was my picture of you, Nick. It's you and that's Andre.
Oh,
It's good,
my
bro.
God.
It's good.
All right.
Branding, advertising.
Love it. Okay. Well, covenant theology, biblical, theological, and historical perspectives. That's what we're working through at the moment. And
Yeah.
we've done the intro, as we've just said. We've looked at chapter 1. All these little essays that have been grouped together around covenant theology. And just helpful for us to move through in a systematic way, and yet not systematic at all, and just basically talk about the stuff we want to talk about, and yet sort of refer you to something that has been written on it that could be a little bit more substantive, and perhaps even more helpful there for you if you did want to go and look at that. So we're going to move along these essays. We're going to try and just do the whole thing, and it gives us a good variety. It'll keep us on topic for a while. This is the bread and butter of this podcast, so we have to be clear on this stuff. And especially as we come to this second essay, or chapter 2, The Covenant of Works in the Old Testament by Richard P. Belcher Jr. Do you know this guy? Any of you guys read the book?
Dude, when I first saw his name, I thought of Richard P. Belcher Sr. Do you know the journey to Calvinism, journey to grace, journey to holiness, journey to baptism, journey to cessationism, the 19 volumes journeys, those theological novels? Do you remember those?
I do. No,
I'm amazed that's Richard Belcher Senior. Yeah, so I thought it was that guy, and I'm like, I was just quickly Google him, and it's this dude's dad. Yeah,
interesting.
At least I think it is. That's
well,
why
I don't know.
It's a junior.
That'd be amazing. We need to check it out.
But the other Richard Belcher is a Credo Baptist.
Yes.
This dude's a Peter Baptist.
Yes, that's true. It's not adding up. What happened? Apostasy.
Unjourneyed.
Yeah.
Unjourneyed to baptism.
No. Okay. Well, he wrote this book on covenant theology fairly recently. I don't know if you've seen it. Belcher? No? Junior? You haven't seen it? You haven't looked at it?
No.
Okay. Well, we'll save that for some other time. But interestingly, a lot of what's in that book comes through in this essay. That there are some moments that are uncomfortable for me, but generally speaking, it's good. It's balanced. He goes for a balanced approach, and it certainly doesn't reject what Klein is saying at the core level. So I find it helpful, and it's a good essay. So let's think about this. Have you had any thoughts, initial thoughts on this, Andre? Or
no, I mean, I thought it was a good chapter. I think that he makes the case for the covenant of works. I guess my sort of overall impression was just how the idea of the covenant works really is essential to make the whole thing fit. Because if you start to take away the covenant of works, and he makes this point, if you start to take away the covenant of works, basically it all starts to crumble into kind of one one covenant. And if you do that, then basically the distinction between law and grace starts to crumble into kind of one. And if you do that, then you basically end up with no gospel, with no justification. Sure. And I was thinking, and the other thing that just occurred to me is just there's two ways to do that. The one is by denying the kind of covenant of works altogether, but the other is by sort of putting grace into the covenant of works before the fall. So you can kind of come at it from sort of two angles to kind of diminish the distinctiveness of the covenant of works, as distinct from the covenant of grace. And that's where it starts to go wrong. So I guess that was just kind of knew it already, but it did help the way kind of who's that?
What is the Lego man freaking you out?
The Lego man with the Bible?
It's so good. So Jesse, that's like a sweater I've got, and I preached, and then he made a Lego man out of me.
Oh, it
and
does.
Then he gave
look
it to me. He's like, Dad, look,
awesome.
It's you. Now I keep it close at all times. I mean, look, ta-da.
You'll want it back.
Ta-da.
Dude,
yeah, no, good point. Thanks for covering
the
whole
courtesy
essay
of everybody listening to the audio podcast is absolutely
good job, Jesse. You're amazing.
Yeah, good job, son. All right, so thanks for covering the whole essay in one go, there, bro. Leave us nothing to talk about at all.
I just say you asked my initial. That was it. That was my overall thing. But I think the whole thing about the chapter is the way he maps that out. So I think that's where the conversation is.
Yeah,
so we all know that the covenant of works is essential, and we all know that if you mess with it, works are going to come in some other way. So, but I think the way he maps it out with the different perspectives on the covenant of works really shows the different ways in which that can happen, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Well, let's go through it, and let's think about some of the arguments he's made, because one of the big things that you come across, first thing you tend to think about as you go into this idea of the covenant of works is, well, it doesn't say covenant anywhere in Genesis 1-3, and that's a big objection that people usually have. Where are we getting this idea? What's even going on? First time you see the word covenant come up is Genesis 6, around Noah's time, and so what's the deal here? And as Andre just said, I mean, like, basically, it's something that you have to pursue, because there's so much at stake with this idea that it's something that you have to look at and go, okay, well, it's not some theological curiosity. We're actually basing a system of theology that is so closely connected to law and gospel and justification on this idea. It's so important to see if there is anything substantial going on there. And so what he does in the essay, which I really appreciated, again, much like the rest of these essays, is just looking for that concrete biblical evidence. Let's just not even presume the system. What are we thinking about when we go for this? Where is the evidence? And so takes us through some of that.
Before you kick it off, Mike, here's what was most helpful for me, and it's not from the article. It's just sort of a perspective that I've learned to come with to Genesis 1, 2, and 3. So, let's step right into the grammatical historical method. This is the method that biblicists would use to try and deny a covenant of works, or to avoid a covenant of works, or so let's use their tools. So let's just think about the original audience of the books of Moses. It would have been the people leaving Egypt. Would have been the people as they were coming to Mount Sinai, passed through the Red Sea, and they're coming into this new covenantal relationship. We've got blessings, we've got curses. God says that he's going to set up a Sabbath as a covenant. We're seeing these promises. If you do this, you will live. If you do this, I'm going to have to punish you. There's going to be an exile out of this land flowing with milk and honey. So, that's the story you've been hearing. And then Moses gives you a book called Genesis. And then, so you've just gone through this experience of being placed in this relationship to God, which is life and death dependent. And then you go and you look through the lens of your own experience at what Genesis 1, 2, and 3 are describing. And then you see man, and you hear the language, tend and keep. The priests have to tend and keep.
Yes,
Adam has to tend and keep. You see you see a Sabbath day as a sign of a covenant, because you know that your Sabbath day is a sign of the covenant. You're seeing if you touch this tree, you're going to die. And so it's just everything,
See,
the
the menorah
lenses
lamp,
and the
the
ears of the
stylized
Jews.
tree, in the
Exactly.
middle of the tabernacle,
Yeah, so the temple and all the furniture of the temple. So everything would have been resonating with the Jews as they heard the story. So if you put yourself in the original audience's position, you're not making stuff up. It's just resonating with exactly what you've been told, or what you've just gone through. So
emphasis
I find that very helpful.
Yeah,
you've got to place yourself in that situation and then read Genesis 1-3.
Amen. And that's just good exegesis at the end of the day. But it's not as we always know and warn, it's not that we are overly reliant on our understanding of that particular A&E context or whatever, because there is some concrete stuff going on at the textual level, which is, not to dismiss anything that you said there. I think that's absolutely true and perfect. But for the person that's not even warm to that idea, and just wants some concrete data,
there's some basic stuff. Amen.
just to kind of chew through at the syntactical level or whatever, there is so much, and I appreciated the way Belcher brought that out. One of the big things that helped me a lot was just, is there an exegetical basis for saying that something is a covenant when it's not actually, there? Is there a thing in the text that allows us to do that? For example, when you see Paul systematizing, in Romans, we have some level of legitimacy given to the process of systematic theology. So,
Amen.
Wherever that sort of thing is, how do the biblical authors themselves, construct covenants where they have not seen the word mentioned? And you have some vivid illustrations of that with the Davidic covenant, where God's making the covenant with David, and the word doesn't get mentioned at all, and then it's just clearly not a problem for the biblical authors, because all the elements of the covenant are there. Later on, you see very specifically it is mentioned as a covenant, and you can't miss it by the time you get to the New Testament. So with that in mind, there is a very strong exegetical basis there for the rationale of looking at every text and going, are there the elements of the covenant here? And if so, does it then make sense that what Paul is drawing from with the two Adam construct is a covenant? I think it's a bit of a no-brainer at that level, but it's just helpful to move in that process,
Yeah, amen.
Yeah.
And just putting meat on the bones. I mean, he does specify certain elements of a covenant. There are parties in the covenant that are clearly identified. There are conditions that are mapped out. If you eat from the tree, you'll die. There's not only conditions, but there's blessings and curses. So there are outcomes. And then covenants operate on the basis of a representation principle, so that the actions of the covenant representative affect others who are part of the covenant relationship. So representation. It's someone standing there as a mediator representing others and bringing the effects on them all. So
and the covenant signs, right? You've got the tree of life, the covenant signs. I mean, so really, if you think about that, it's 5 like seriously tangible elements of the covenant. How could you not? It's almost, then we haven't even gone to Romans yet, but how
this is the covenant works in the Old Testament,
right? This is just like Genesis. I mean, there it is, right? You've got to do something with that data. So that's important.
And I would argue that the Sabbath is probably a sign of the covenant as well. Just mirror reading it against what God did with Moses, that Sabbath was given as a sign of the covenant between them.
For sure.
Yeah.
Amen. Cool. You want to say something there, Andre?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, and it should be absolutely no problem for people to accept that the idea is there without the word being there. I mean, we take it for granted, and we should take it for granted. It just doesn't work as a hermeneutic.
To demand a word.
To demand that the word is there in order for the concept to be there. And we know this is not true, because if you go down that line, you'd have to reject the Trinity. So theologically, unless you're willing to go there, that's going to be a problem. But we also know that from other concepts in the Bible. We just you can't consistently use that as a hermeneutic. And so it shouldn't be a problem that we're seeing, to be able to say we're seeing strong exegetical evidence for the covenant of works, even if we don't see the word covenant. But that seemed to be a stumbling block even for some serious Reformed writers.
I know that's we'll get onto Murray and the guys soon enough. But yeah, it's I could understand the kickback in some ways because there is a danger of just going ahead and putting words where they aren't in the text as well. And certainly, Reformed theology's got a bad rap for that. In that they have just been a little bit on the dogmatic side and just proof texted their way into some serious theological constructs. But you can't overreact. And I think half of the problem there is just trying to find out. Just what we're doing right now, just are there the elements there? And if they are there, we work with it. End of story. But
there was just on that, there was an interesting Reform Forum episode recently, which was basically on a kind of defense, if you like, an apologetic for proof texting.
Okay.
Because it was basically saying that although there is such a thing as bad proof texting, proof texting is not an illegitimate way to use the Bible if it's done well, And so,
was that in the context
it was
of
an
the
interesting
confession?
episode. Yeah.
Was that in the context of the confession where the proof text points to the commentary work done behind the confession?
Yeah, it was, but not just the ordinary proof text in the confession, just with Bible verses. Yeah, it was.
I remember it's a bit of a tangent, but it's really interesting. I remember sitting in a class with Jim Rennie, I think it was, and he was saying that half of the thing with the proof text in the confession, half of the problem is people look at the proof text, and then they go and look it up in their Bibles, and it doesn't seem like it obviously shows what's being said there in the confession. But what they were assuming that everyone who would do that would do is that they would consult the commentaries that have expounded that text, in full orb. And, so you got everything from Owen to whoever, just the great commentators on the particular passage. And that would become their theological / exegetical basis, not just the proof text itself, which I thought was, I've always done that since you mentioned that. And it's quite amazing, because sometimes you just won't see what they're pointing to. And then you go through it and you're like, wow, there's a whole world here. And sometimes they're wrong, but the bottom line is, at least there's a bit of a methodology there. One of the proof
I did want to ask you guys your
Yeah.
opinion before you carry on there. It's a slight segue about the trees. Just asking your opinion. Do you think Adam ate from the tree of life?
No.
Okay.
No, I would also say no.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Was that an option?
There are some
I didn't
people who
realize
think
was
that
an
he
option.
did.
Right, totally. Yeah,
No,
there's
there
a
are
whole
some
big-
people who think that he
Oh,
had
you mean he was
access until-
eating like he was eating constantly, and then he was
so
forbidden
the reason he
from
had
it.
eternal life was because he had access until it was taken away.
He
That's
was
what some
basically
people might
taking the
think.
Lord's Supper of the tree, and then he was prevented
Yeah.
from taking the.
I
yeah.
agree with that. I think he wasn't eating. I think Genesis 3:22 indicates that unless he take out his hand and eat while he's in the situation of sinfulness, it would be a terrible thing.
Totally.
But
Well, my understanding of that's bound up with the reward. So the tree of life is the reward that's on offer. It's connected to the Sabbath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think as long as I'm probably happy with either, as long as you don't try and make the wrong theological case with the eating. But I'm inclined towards not eating. Yeah.
Man, I wish I had this Klein quote on me right now, but there's this part where he'll talk about the tree invites its participant or something like that to come in the worthiness of the covenant keeper, and to say, and it says, "Take, eat. This is my body for you." It's like, and he just connects everything that is happening
Joins
there
all
with
the
the
dots.
tree and the cross and the and the curse and the blessing, and then Eden, and then Jesus, and Jesus is the tree of life, and it's crazy. But that is another episode.
Amen.
But just think about the proof texting for a second. Hosea 6:7 is the big one that often comes up.
Amen.
The kind of sketchy. Is it a proof text? Isn't it a proof text? But it is worth considering. And in fact, I know you just got this book now at the airport, or you were reading it. But what is his name? Brian. I can't remember his name now. Brian.
Estelle.
No. Just look on There's one essay there that deals with the Hosea.
The one that does the taxonomy, or it's got Brenton C. Ferry.
No, So look for
Byron G.
Byron.
Curtis.
That's it. Byron G.
the
Curtis.
one.
Yeah. So
Hosea 6 verse 7 and
give the
covenant
title of the
breaking.
book.
Okay, so it's The Law is Not of Faith, Essays on Works and Grace in the Mosaic Covenant, edited by Estelle Fesco and Van Drunen.
Yeah, great book. And
excellent.
another group of essays we'll probably come around to having a closer look at some point. But
there's some awesome stuff in here.
There really is, yeah. But
Belcher Jr. does an essay as well.
Yeah. So Byron G. Curtis, that was who I was thinking about, and he really goes into great depth on this, Hosea 6, 7,
Yeah.
and highly recommend anyone who's interested have a look at that. But I think some of the who is it talking about? It seems but like Adam, they transgressed the covenant. Talking about Israel, it seems like quite a wow. That's a no-brainer. There we go. Adam was in a covenant, and they transgressed the covenant. As Israel had transgressed, Israel had transgressed as Adam had, and so the discussion comes out of that. Is it about a place that's being referenced here? It could be this faint allusion to a place. Is it just a generic like humanity
in general?
There? My thought on that has always been, even if it is about, it might not be saying exactly what we wanted to say. If it's like Adam, they transgressed the covenant. But think about it. If they're saying like humanity, it's making the same point
still got to
at
ask
some
what
level.
Covenant.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's if it's saying humanity, it's assuming Adam's pattern of disobedience and comparing it with that and the results that came from that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For sure.
I guess what it might mean is just less clear on the whole federal headship thing, but I don't know. Even then, you can still derive it from So it just either way, you're going to see the covenant there.
Yeah, and one of the things that clinches it for me though is I think he does. I'm just having a look here. I think he does mention it at some point where he talks about Adam, or at least in Romans, Paul, where he talks about the sin not being like the transgression. Let's have a look here. 12:21, is that it?
12-21, yeah.
Do you want to read it for us? Have you got it there?
Nope.
Hang on, I'm almost there.
Okay.
One sec.
Because I think that's really helpful for
Okay.
Yeah.
It is. Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, and in this way death came to all people because all sinned. To be sure, sin was in the world before the law was given. But sin is not charged to anyone's account where there is no law. Nevertheless, death reigned from the time of Adam to the time of Moses, even over those who did not sin by breaking a command, as did Adam, who is a pattern of the one to come. So
if you think about what he's saying there, no, that's good. Just thinking about this Adam, was there a covenant with Adam or humanity? Or, what Paul is doing there is really relying on the idea that there was sin, there was something. I mean, obviously sin has reigned from the fall. Death has been present. There's no one's doubting that, but it was not like the transgression of Adam. There wasn't a knowing transgression of the covenant of works, and so that comes in for the first time again with Moses. So there's this direct connection there that he's making from the time of Moses, where now all of a sudden Israel, although they're nothing different from what has gone before in the sense that they're sinning and dying, now they're transgressing.
Why Adam and Moses held up as
exactly. And then obviously straight into the two Adam construct that he brings. But so that when in conjunction with Hosea 6:7, it's just powerful. And then go read that Byron Curtis essay as well, because I think he brings in all the nuances that scholars would like to see, and yet makes a convincing case that it needs to be thought of that way. But it's quite a detailed thing, so I'll leave it alone for now. But then we move on to some other questions, maybe of a more theological nature. Moving away from the more exegetical stuff. Just what do you call this covenant? The taxonomy, the nomenclature. How do we organize this whole thing? And what's in a name, I suppose, becomes the next thing.
The Adamic administration.
Yeah, or the covenant of peace, or the covenant of the garden, or
creation,
the covenant of Eden, or there are so many different versions of it. So what he does is he goes, listen, if you're going to call it the covenant of nature, it does give the wrong impression that, somehow man was naturally able to just kind of, get this thing that God had promised, and it does sort of leave out the covenant element in that sense. And what God was doing there in promising some eschatological glory ultimately
Yeah.
through this.
It
Through
doesn't stress the legal aspect enough.
Exactly, good way to put it. Yeah, and then with the Edenic covenant, it is kind of confusing in that you've got a lot of things happening in Eden. So are we talking like before the fall, after the fall? So Eden,
Yeah.
the Edenic covenant might not be the best.
Too
Uh,
generic.
Now, before we get onto why it should be a covenant of works, I mean, I do appreciate, though, the need to see something of a distinction between the theologizing of the biblical theological covenant from the presence of a covenant in the text itself. So I don't mind if someone says to me, "Hey, I want to call it the Edenic covenant." I go, "Fine, Edenic covenant.
What do you mean?
What do you
Yeah.
mean? There it is. Okay, good. What's the next one? The Noahic. I'm not theologizing the Noahic right up front. I'm not calling it the covenant of grace or the covenant of works or the common grace covenant. I'm just saying Noahic covenant. What's the next one? Abrahamic. Okay, let's just leave it at that for now. Next one, Mosaic. Right. Next one, and you're just working through the plain old. There is a presence of a covenant here, and you've got these certain fixtures that are attached to that reality. And then once you've established where all the covenants are and give them their biblical theological names, so to speak, then you can start theologizing. Then you can go, okay, well, what is the distinctive
Yeah.
feature of that which God did in the garden before the fall? Well, it seems then that you need to overlay what's happening there with the theological construct to emphasize the works, antithesis to grace, in the very same way that you would do with the covenant of grace, being this overarching umbrella that includes all the administration of the Old Testament leading into the New Covenant. So I don't. He doesn't really touch that. He doesn't go there. But I think that is something that's quite important.
Yeah, amen. Totally
Well,
agree.
I think what he was getting at was just the people calling it different things in order to deny certain aspects of it or avoid certain ways of thinking about it. I think that's the problem because like you say, it's not about the semantics. It's not we're not trying to be pedantic about the exact words and phrases being used, but it is it's just about getting, like you said, that someone could easily be going through the all of the different biblical covenants, and then you would expect him to say Adamic because he's going to be saying Mosaic and Davidic and Noahic, but if it's kind of in the sort of, like you say, the more overarching level of covenant of grace, covenant of works, then that's what you would expect there. And it's only if that's avoided at that level, because there's a deliberate kind of moving away from the idea of the covenant of works, that's when things start to become a problem.
It just depends who I'm talking to. I've got a conversation in my mind that I've been having recently with someone, and they want to just come up with their own labels for everything. And they want to just ignore all the historical work that's done. And they just want to sort of put their own name on it, as just depending on whatever word they can pull out of a text somewhere, and just like sort of innovate without having to, connect themselves to the historical discussion that's gone on before them. So I would encourage people to use the covenant of works because of all that it means.
Yeah.
And I think we do live in an age where, you do signal what party you stand with. And you don't want to be naive and ignorant and say things that just, or, if I say that God is the ground of all being, whoops, I just quoted Paul Tillich. Now, it might sound really good, but, I've got to be careful not to send all the wrong signals by what I'm saying, depending on who's listening to me. So, yeah.
For sure. And, you do, just thinking about those historical sort of standards, I think it is just very clear that a covenant of works is in view in the Westminster Standards, in the Reformed Baptist,
exactly.
1689. So if you are concerned with that, this is a thing that you have to contend with. It is a mainstream idea. It is something that has been well worn. It is the redemptive historical underlay for the law grace contrast. So that's why the terms works and grace are being set against each other. It's the same as you're preparing the way for understanding everything of the significance of law and gospel. So you're just doing that at a at a biblical theological level rather than just some sort of ontological abstraction. And I think that's important then to match those terms up. But the role of grace, I suppose, just following right on from that, as he mentions here, the big debate is really, it fundamentally is about what you do with grace before the fall, right? Do you see any kind of grace in the covenant of works? Now, anyone that's followed us for any level of time will know that Klein was dead against this idea. In fact, interestingly, really early on in his writings, he would, before the theonomy stuff and before Shepherd, and he was okay. He was okay to just kind of talk about grace before the fall. And what happened with all of that that stuff that happened was it sharpened him on this and really made him just set his face against the idea, tooth and nail, that you must define grace properly. It's demerited favor, and there is no way that you can see that prior to the fall. He was happy with the terms, beneficence, or just, I don't know, goodness, the goodness of God, but
generosity.
Generosity.
I mean, the confession does have language we can use. God condescends. So I remember my early struggles. I used to love John Murray. I used to dig into his 4 volumes in the library at the seminary I was at. I had loved his Principles of Conduct, Love of Redemption, Accomplished, Applied. Just try to read everything I could get my hands on. And I remember some of his arguments, that, the reward that we receive is just so big. We've got to, how can Adam's little obedience earn such a great reward? That must be by grace. And, there's this creator creature distinction, and, God humbling and condescending to come down. Let's put this, how can we not call that grace? So, using those sorts of arguments, I was won over. But then hearing about Klein's definition of demerited favor, not just merely unmerited favor, but that it's God's movement towards an enemy, his love towards an enemy, where he should be giving them hell, and instead he gives them salvation. Adam wasn't a sinner, so by that definition, we can't say there's grace before the fall, and I think that's incredibly helpful.
It is, and well, also just even.
I mean,
sorry, Griffin.
No, carry on. I was going to introduce something slightly different. So.
Okay, well, just on that point, then, just. Another, I think what Klein does that's also helpful there is even the language of condescending. He challenges that idea, not so much on the grace front, but out of the nominalist controversy and the use, the way that much of the language came out of that that medieval sort of debate, that soteriological debate, condign, merit, and so forth, and it almost it was trying to solve a problem that we're really not trying to solve in covenant theology. And so created this idea that you could, once God had made this covenant of works, there was almost this, God might have followed, or at least, once God had created man, not created the covenant of works. Once God had created man, he might well have entered into a covenant of works or not, depending on his condescending mercy at the time, or condescending goodness. And Klein was against that. He's like, listen, the covenant is established at the creation of man in his image. And so, sure, we can talk about God condescending, but we've got to make sure that we're not letting that just sort of like open a door to a debate that's not really even ours, properly speaking. And we need to make sure that we're not giving the wrong impression. And so I think that also is really helpful in terms of understanding this fixed. It's not like anyone is saying that God is not infinitely, mind-blowingly, full of beneficence, just what is the word even? I suppose we all struggle, and that's why we go for grace. But it's just there's something mind-blowing about the way that God stooped to do this. But we have to hold equally high that he did. And when he made man, this covenant of works was established that had in place not a redemption, not a demerited favor, or but a very clear justice principle. And what we're actually setting up there is how to understand what Jesus achieved for us. So Amen. It's like you have to be so clear on that, because as soon as you introduce any kind of grace, as Klein says again and again, before the fall, you have to say for the second Adam to some degree or another. You have to say that Jesus
Jesus needed
himself,
grace in order to
yeah, and
Jesus needed grace and faith and obedience, and Jesus had to come to a place of maturity before he could earn a reward. And
it takes one of several forms, yeah, but it's all along that line, and it's just, we know something's gone wrong at that point if we love the gospel. So anyway, just all of that to kind of put on the table at this point. What were you going to say, though, Andre?
Well, I mean, similarly to the point you were just making, because what it does is it forces a change in the definition of grace, and I think that to the extent that you're only a hop, skip, and a jump away from viewing grace as some kind of substance, and that whole kind of nature grace dualism thing that you find so prevalent in Roman Catholicism, I think you're into a lot of the same ground there. You have a different kind of doctrine of humanity, because suddenly human beings they required some assistance outside of their own, being made in God's image in order to be able to fulfill God's plans and purposes. Suddenly they can't do that anymore. So they needed something extra to be able to do that. So you're into the concupiscence idea, which is Roman Catholicism. And so it has implications for the doctrine of humanity. But like you say, it also has implications to the idea of grace in general, because it can't be God's disposition towards us, not only to restrain from giving us the judgment we did deserve, but then to go over and above that and to give us good things that we didn't deserve. You no longer have grace as a kind of disposition. It's something else, or at least to be totally fair, it's very easy to see how you could slide from a grace before the fall that is a kind of disposition, is a kind of divine assistance, into a kind of grace as a substance, which is compensating for some lack in us in our creation. And I just can't, it's easy to see how you would go down the Roman Catholic track from there. And many have, and many continue to do.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's the whole, the Roman Catholic thing. It's like you're operating in reformed worlds, but it's like, wow, it's there's a whole nother discussion on the Roman Catholic front. But it is interesting that, I think we've mentioned this before, a lot of people that gave way to the Norman Shepherd controversy ended up in Rome. I think we did talk about that, and probably that's a little bit of the reason for it. But okay, there we go. So that's we say no to grace before the fall. We think that's a bad idea. Some of the guys that did say that, or at least some, as he points out, like Palmer Robertson. Wow, what a trip, because he just, half the problem here is that if they're not saying something like, revisionist, they're just using language that's just, as you said earlier, just different and trying to be creative or biblicist or something, and it just throws everything off again, and everyone's just like in a whirlwind about.
Especially any young guy who's trying to get his head around something. There's nothing worse than reading a guy thinking you're understanding his terms. You go read another guy and he's using the same ideas with different words. It's like, man,
especially when we have a freaking confession, you got a confession that's to stick to it. Can we just it's annoying, and they do say that we're using terms differently and everything, but it's just Robertson, I've never been able to kind of recommend his book for that reason, because one of the things I find kind of concerning is that he denies the Pactum Salutis in important ways. So I don't like that at all. But then also just the bi-covenantal thing, and he uses the covenant of, how does he do it again? Covenant of redemption becomes the covenant
of grace. He uses the covenant of redemption for the covenant of grace.
That's right. Yeah. So it ends up sounding like a little bit like
Sounds
John
like
Gill. And so we know the problems there as well. All sorts of things you're opening up to. And then Murray, as big as he was, he was openly revisionist about the whole thing. He was like recasting the deal. He was want to just get a little bit more in tune with the Bible here. He sort of brought the definition of covenants that only worked with grace and not with works. So he didn't have space for the garden covenant if it was of works. But Murray, was able to do it. He was able to end up with the law gospel antithesis, and he didn't compromise on justification in any way. So we're thankful
Yeah, he
for
kept
that.
the imputation of Adam's sin. Therefore, he kept the imputation of an alien righteousness and
Yeah,
justification.
exactly.
He had those key things in place. So his redefining didn't send him off, but he did set the trajectory for others. But what I have found is that Murray is probably, out of all the names here, he's definitely the most influential.
Oh, totally.
I mean, Murray's book,
Robertson's huge though as well. Like,
I don't know. I don't know. I think in contemporary Reformed circles, O. Palmer Robinson's probably more influential.
You reckon? Because I mean, just think about redemption accomplished applied, and think about what that meant to you as a young Calvinist. Think about the confidence that you had in this guy Murray, who just like, wow, it just blew your mind, you know. And then suddenly you pick up his other stuff. You start venturing into the world of Murray's commentary on Romans, principles of conduct, his 4 volumes by Banner of Truth, and then you start bumping up against the stuff. And then Robert Raymond quotes Murray with regards to his Adamic administration, and so I just feel like there's this long Murray shadow over the whole thing.
This Murray withdrawal process, and got to go through the whole thing.
Got to renew my mind from Murray.
It's
is this a Murray thought, or is this
exactly? Well, you see, with the 20th century Reformed Baptist kind of thing, I mean, it's so heavily influenced by Murray, and so a lot of the reason I like 1689 federalism is because it kicks back at the Murray influence that has influenced the 20th century Reformed Baptist view, which is again another episode, but it's kind of it's complicated at that level. So I think
I just feel like I want to warn people, because like you get into your Calvinism, you start latching onto Murray, and he's going to start defining covenant, then you got to unlearn him and then like rebuild. It's like, don't make that mistake.
But it's kind of true for
redemption
everyone.
Accomplished applied. There's a little question mark over definitive sanctification. We can defer over that one, but then just steer clear of his covenant theology.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think so. So Belcher, by the way, we're for anyone that is wanting to track, we're disagreeing with him a little bit as well, because I can't find the quote now, but he's kind of okay with the idea of talking about grace before the fall, and he just wants to properly define it and everything. So I'm just going,
I think he's the guy who's saying, look, if you define your terms, I'll be happy.
Yeah, exactly. Which is
so
reasonable.
He says this, some use the term grace in a redemptive sense for the pre-fall situation, but grace in its fullest redemptive sense of unmerited or demerited favor cannot exist before the entrance of sin into the world.
So he's saying, this is what Klein's actually saying.
Yeah,
we agree. This is what these guys are saying. We agree. So fine, you can do it that way if you're a nice balanced individual. But for me, I tend on the extreme side.
Yeah, amen.
I like to find my,
the
thing is, it's just so important.
Speaking.
Yeah, and it's just such an important connection. It's such as we were saying, it's just a quick little skip to real problems, like not small problems, but like justification problems. If you don't, this is one of those little bits of terminology. Like,
it's just
we just have
3 statements you need to remember.
Yeah.
Covenant of redemption is a covenant of works. There's no grace before the fall, and there's no common grace in Israel.
Done deal. Thanks.
Done. Everything's sorted out.
Sorted out. Just summed the whole thing up. Why are we even reading this essay? That's done.
Exactly, man.
All right. Now, he goes into some federal vision stuff, and he actually does talk about not 1689 federalism vision, Andre.
No, not that.
Not
actual real federalism.
The actual real,
Yeah.
Wait, so we are talking about 1689 federalism?
No, we're not. We're not talking about that, because that's not even a real thing.
But not 1689.
We're talking about federal vision, which has an incidental connection by
federalism.
Way of... Yeah, exactly. So federal vision, and then that's Jordan, and it's just wow. I mean, you read this and you realize, whoa, man.
Yeah.
So Jordan just revamped the whole deal,
Yeah.
I mean, even just the idea of saying, no, we don't like works before the fall because there's a Pelagian character about it. Like, it just even misses Calvinism, It even misses that. It's like, the only reason we're Augustinian to begin with is because of the fall, It's just, who cares if it has a Pelagian character?
No sin. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. So, I don't know. Just
Pelagius was right if he was talking about Adam.
Exactly. To a degree. So, there's that. And then the other guy he does mention, it's maybe
Dumbrell.
Dumbrell, who's actually quite
I've
important.
never heard of that guy. Have you heard of him?
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
He's like the most important guy right now, bro.
Really?
Because of what
he sounded a little bit like Joe Booth.
So hot right now.
So just we've spoken about before with Gentry and Vellum, and progressive covenantalism. They're all drawn from Dumbrell. So basically,
Okay.
he's coming along and he's providing the undergirding for all of their theology, and he's basically saying
Is he a
it ends
Baptist
up.
or a Peter Baptist?
Well, he's just I don't know what he is on that, but I think he's just a reform guy that went heavily biblicist and basically the issue is that in my reading anyway, I've looked at it recently and it's just monocovenantalism, but it's just without the
Oh,
theological
totally.
construct attached.
Yeah.
It does. I don't know.
There
Not a
was one
fan.
statement I marked here that just disturbed me. He says, Dumbrell does not discuss further the implications of Adam's failure for his descendants, in other words,
Right.
imputation,
Right.
or for the obedience of Christ and fulfilling the law, justification. So in his renovating of the categories of covenant, he doesn't even show how it maps out for condemnation in Adam and justification in Christ,
And
which
that's
is like,
exactly the
what are
vibe
you
you get.
doing? If you're not going there, why are you even playing there?
Right.
But
And
doesn't federal vision theology reject the idea of imputation?
Yeah, this is
Usually.
Dumbrell. This is not Federal Vision. This is
Oh,
this
sorry.
is the main influence on progressive covenantalism.
Yeah.
Progressive.
Oh,
covenantalism.
sorry. Right.
yeah,
Missed that.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so but I mean that's the thing, it's that biblicist tendency. It's like, well, let's just who needs a system anyway? Let's just try and it's no creed but Christ.
It all just began. The first covenant is Noah, basically, and that just basically assumes something that's come before it. And
yeah.
yeah.
But I don't want to say that his stuff. It's very detailed and very helpful. And actually, I found a lot of stuff there to bolster my own position in his exegesis. So that it's worth checking out if anyone's interested. But in terms of where he goes with it, it's just it actually reminds me a lot of like when you read through like Carson's commentaries or something like that, where he just like rips it apart and basically puts it half back together again, and it's a lot of interesting, very well informed exegesis, except it's just like
he exposes you to the text.
Exactly, and has no interest in putting it back together. You have to build it from scratch again. Anyway, so that's that. And what else? Oop, sorry.
Well, I think there was an interesting comment just under Federal Vision, just sort of second to last paragraph before the conclusion. He says, now, because we look at the Adam Jesus Christ parity, as for Adam, so for Christ, and so the Federal Vision talk about this process of maturation. So they don't want it to be by works alone. They want it to be by faith, and then even the faith just gets you to a place where you're now ready to receive the reward.
Oh my goodness!
And so this is how he puts it. He says, Jesus became the first mature man, perfect in faith toward the Father and perfect in obedience. He thus became eligible for transformation into glory through death, not because he had earned the right to it, but because he had matured to the point of being fit for it. So he didn't earn the reward through his obedience. He got himself ready to receive something nice or something
it almost
suitable.
Strikes me as a kind of like a really pre-Reformation sort of an ontological thing going on there in new categories. And
it's just anything. He wants Dodge works, and he wants to make basically faith the central aspect for Adam and for Christ. So he says this: we receive not Jesus' merits, but his maturity, his glorification. The reigning paradigm for Adam, for Christ, and for us is growth into maturity instead of breaking or keeping of the law.
Yeah.
So he's trying to get away from the legal categories and put it all into sonship categories.
Right.
And,
but in the process, really get very legalistic. I mean,
in the process, putting the burden back on us.
Exactly.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah. All right. Well, there we go. So, anyways, all to say, not all. I think he ends up with a very important point here. Not all that deny the covenant of works or don't get it like 100% right automatically deny the gospel. We want to insinuate that. I think it's a really good point. Think of Lutherans, for example, or just Luther himself. I mean, my goodness, they got the gospel. They have the gospel. The more important thing is you get law and gospel. But as those who have bought into a reformed system, we care about this because this is our biblical theological undergirding for law and gospel. This is where it comes from. This is what we see, the whole Bible sort of piecing together for us. And so, at that level, it becomes a very, very important topic. So it's also important to have this up front because we refer back to it again and again and again. It becomes the baseline for all the rest of the covenant theology that we talk about. Certainly, you can't think really about the eternal covenant properly. And I love the way the first essay did that, connected the two. You have the proof that we would sort of use to talk about an eternal covenant, very similar parallel ways to the way we talk about the garden covenant, because they are just linked at every level. And then that is your heart and soul of covenant theology right there.
Amen.
Good. So anyways, hopefully that's helpful for anyone who has not thought about any of that before, at least just to get you started and get you reading some more. And I don't know if anyone has any other closing thoughts there.
That's good. Love it.
All right, good.
Yeah.
Well, you ready to see the little the thing again?
Oh, yes.
I mean, it's
Let
almost
the
like
sunrise.
The thing, yeah. Oh, yeah. The clouds and the
sunrise.
vine
The
and,
glory come. Let the garden grow.
and the old lady.
Exactly.
The old
Now
lady
you're
in the
into it.
corner.
Now you're into it. I like this. You're getting it. All right, let's do it. I'm excited.